But welcome. I am Missy Morgan, and we're here from Sante Consulting. Webinar is called From Residency to Practice, Strategies for Securing Your First Job. So let's get this show on the road. If you're interested in connecting with us, wanted to go ahead and give you our social links and the website address. So if you wanted to connect with Sante after this, you've got all different kinds of ways. I'll also have a slide for that at the end. To get going here, my name is Missy Morgan. I'm the Director of Marketing for Sante Consulting. And I've got Rich Cornell here on the line as well. Rich is the founder and the president of Sante Consulting, and he's going to take over here in a few minutes. But just to give you an idea about Sante Consulting, we're a national lab medicine recruiting and consulting firm. So we focus exclusively on the recruitment and retention of people like you, pathologists, PhDs, and then lab medicine executives at the director level and above. Now, Rich has been doing this for more than 30 years. So he's got a ton of experience doing webinars like this where we can help residency, pathology residents and fellows like you land your first ideal job is one of his favorite parts of his work. So we're really glad to have you here today. We're going to cover three main topics. One, the job market today, what's happening? Number two, what does compensation look like for pathologists? And number three, how do you establish a search strategy? Instead of just sort of blindly going into a job search, we want to make sure that you're very organized in your approach so you can just not waste any of your time. Now, if you have any questions, I've noticed a few raised hands. We're going to have a Q&A session. But feel free to go ahead and pop a question in the chat. If we're able to get to it before Q&A, rock on. So we want to make sure that you get a solid start, you ace your interviews, and you navigate your offers. And that's going to be the limit to our topics today. Now, at the very end, if you wouldn't mind, we have a super quick 5-question survey, just so we know, did this help you? So if you have 1 minute to fill that out for us, it would be really helpful so we know that next time we offer a webinar, we're doing it in a way that's really helpful for you. Now I'm going to turn it over to Rich and look forward to talking with you soon again. Rich, you're on mute. Sorry.
Thanks, Missy. Always a pleasure. Technology is not my forte. So, yeah, I'm glad I have Missy at the helm here to help navigate. Welcome, everybody, to today's webinar. I'm excited about the opportunity to be presenting on this topic. This is one of my favorite topics to present on. This is a new series for us this year. We thought we would do a lunch and learn format, quick 30 minutes. We've got a lot of information to cover in the next 30 minutes. Hopefully it'll be helpful in securing your next job or job out of fellowship. For the last, 3 decades, I'm aging myself, of course. We've been working with young pathologists such as yourselves in securing their first job opportunities. So welcome. Hopefully this will be beneficial to you. So the first thing we're going to talk about is really what does the market look like overall? And there's been a lot of articles recently written that goes into the shortage of pathologists, the supply and demand. This was one first comprehensive survey that came out recently that talked about the global shortage of pathologists. So it's just not in the United States, it's globally as well. And so when we look at that, there's a lot of data sources that, will support that there's a major shortage overall across it. We recently worked with John David at Laboratory Economics in writing this article that supported that there is a overall shortage. Recently, the college put out a new study that revealed it's interesting because the way that pathologists are counted through the AMA and the ABMS to the actual number of pathologists, there's a lot of disparities between the number of pathologists. And what really the outcome of that was that pathologists, what's really happening is that the numbers are much lower than anticipated as far as total number of pathologists that are currently practicing, and then what the job demand really is. Before COVID, pre-COVID, there was a study that actually came out that predicted a shortage of pathologists going into 2025, and that's what we're seeing today. So, when we look at if you're a resident or fellow that's completing your last year of fellowship, you're in a great position right now because we have the highest record of available jobs today in the market. As of, I believe, yesterday or 2 days ago, just on pathology outlines, there were 736 advertised positions. So you have a lot of options out there to look at various positions when you're conducting your job search. That being said, we have to consider this is just outlines. There's a lot of other job boards that are out there and a lot of positions that don't go advertised. So when we look at the unadvertised positions, along with the advertised positions, my guesstimation is there's between 900 and 1,000 open jobs out there. So let's talk about that a little bit. When you look at pathology outlines, here's the graph of what the job market looked like pre-COVID to today. And you can see from January of 22 to today, it's been very steady as the number of jobs out there. And so you have to ask yourself, how do you filter through all of those jobs? What are the good ones? What are the bad ones? How do I interview? And we're going to talk about that through this presentation. So go ahead, Missy. Next slide. Um, First, you have to think about regionally where the jobs are. Historically, the majority of the openings, when you look at this, have been in the Northeast and the South, and that's true here too. From 2020 to 2024, if you look at the southern regions, there's 128 or 32%. Northeast is up 30%. And we're hearing a lot about the West Coast. A lot of people want to go to the West Coast. Unfortunately, it's one of the lower ones unless you're going to go up to Canada, which is at 15%, and it's been pretty true over the years. And so this is a good snapshot. So what are the highest subspecialties in demand? Now, you're already in a fellowship or you're a resident going to choose a fellowship. So this may be a good way of you to determine what areas you want to go into. And I call, when you look at the top five, I always call this when we do the presentations, the top five NFL draft picks, if you're one of these top five. In this case, it's cytopathology, heme, GI, GYN, breast. Now, it's interesting, if we would have looked back 5 years ago at these numbers, cyto and heme would have been down at the bottom of the list in the top five. Derm path, GU, GI would have been the top three. So what's changed in the marketplace? What's changed in the marketplace is with all of the retirements that have happened and the increase in volumes expectations within specifically hospital-based pathology, the demand for more of a general surgical pathologist with cytopathology or hematopathology has increased. The top two subspecialties within pathology that are the highest number of board certification, the largest number is cyto and heme. So there's more board certified cyto and hematopathologists than any of the other subspecialties. And so we've seen a retirement trends within those because those folks are, that were grandfathered in, especially in the cytopath in the 80s and early 90s, are, aging out. So this gives you a good understanding of kind of where that demand is. So now that you understand the demand, we're going to go right into it. This is probably why a lot of you are here. Is let's talk about compensation. How do we get compensated? And so if you look at this survey, this came up. This is from Doximity in 2003, and we don't have the 2004 data yet. Pathology overall compensation went up by 2.7%. Average comp is 357, 360,000. When you look at fellows and what fellows are being, go ahead, next slide, Missy. What we're seeing, first year fellowship trained compensation, the range is 250, low, high, 400,000. Now, what's the variance? The variance there and the difference is practice setting, academics versus private group, commercial versus industry, and subspecialty plays a lot of that. So, what subspecialty is in demand? Bonuses and relocation that we're seeing, annual bonuses, 20% of base salary up to signing bonuses, average is 18,000. Some groups are offering $100,000 signing bonuses. Some are offering educational loan assistance. Average relocation that we're seeing is 15,000. Now with relocation, just keep in mind, and talk to your tax advisor because it is a taxable event and there is tax consequences on it. And in some cases, we're seeing groups in lieu of a relocation package, lumping it into just the signing bonus because the tax consequences are the same. Go ahead, Missy. Yeah. Benefits, relocation, things you need to think about when you're looking at your benefit package. Relocation, CME allowance, defined bonus or incentive, robust retirement package, time off, scheduled time, paid health insurance, signing bonuses, student loan repayment. And is there a defined partnership track or a plan of action if you're looking at that type of practice?
And just one quick thing for I've seen some new people hop on this webinar, and you're so welcome here. We're so glad to have you. I see a lot of really great discussion already starting in the Q&A. That's going to be the basis of how we do our Q&A session at the very tail end of this call. So stick around. We're going to answer those questions first in, first out. I just wanted to say that. Keep going, Rich. And
Thanks, Missy. So when you're approaching your job search for the very first time, you have to establish your strategy and what your strategy looks like. There's a lot of factors, that go into this. First is get a solid start, get a head start. I'm a firm believer that the best jobs are the first ones to go. And so now that we're into September, the fall months, really the start gun goes off for what we call the recruiting season. And so groups, practices, academic centers have, in most cases, already forecasted and started recruiting for the 2025 season. And so you need to get ahead of that. And again, there's a lot of moving parts that go into your job search. The things that you need to think about is number one, your CV and what the purpose of that CV is. And so you have to create, depending on the type of position that you're looking at, various versions of your CV. If you're looking to go into a private practice setting, most private groups really don't want to see all of your entire academic profile. And so you want to have a private practice version, which is more of a bio sketch. And then when you apply, and if you're applying to academic institutions, your academic CV, which is going to be much more detailed. Now, what's the goal of the CV? Right? The goal of the CV, when you send that CV off to someone, the interviewer, there's only one goal, in my opinion. And that goal is to make yourself stand out and get a response. That's the only goal. You want to trigger a response from that individual you're sending it to. A positive response, ideally. And so the goal of the CV, people lose sight of that, right? So don't get caught up in all of the details of your CV as much as remembering what the goal is. So there's some basic CV tips that we need to cover.
yeah. And Rich, before you do that, I got a super quick question. I've got the mind of a marketer, right? And I think Rich is onto something. You're sending it to somebody. You got to think about that person receiving it so that when they receive it well. But Rich, when you say you want a good response, is that the combination of the CV and the cover page together? Like you kind of view that as
Correct.
one package? Okay.
Great question. Yes. Yeah, exactly. CV and cover letter. And we're going to talk about your cover letter here. So here's some basic CV tips. One is make sure that it's in reverse chronological order. Make sure that it's easy to read to the viewer. 12-point font, no pictures because pictures sometimes don't load. Throw off formatting for the person when they're open it. Don't make it too fancy. Um, uh, vary it based on the job and the position that you're applying to. So if you're specifically applying to, let's say you're a GI pathologist looking for a GI, make sure that it has the details about your training in GI pathology, and the aspects that you think are going to be important to that job. Um, use bold and underline headings. Just keep it simple. The other thing, go ahead, Missy, is, make sure that you leave any personal critical data off, such as your birthday, social security number, no photos, don't draft in the last minute, take some research, and please, please, please use spell check. Um, However, back up. Let me back that up. When you use spell check, it's not going to catch something like ground rounds if you're using grand rounds. So have somebody review your CV and give you feedback. You could certainly send it to somebody at my firm, Sante Consulting, myself, one of my team members, to proofread it as well. We'd be happy to do that for you. But I can't tell you the typos that we see in CVs because you're only relying on spell check. Go ahead. Cover letters are critical. Cover letter will make you come alive to that reader. And that's the goal of the cover letter. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself, what you're looking for, why that job is important to you, what's driving you to that, what are your goals, your interests. If you're applying to an academic center, put a 5-year career goal statement in it, personalize it, make it each cover letter high touch, high feel, so that reader knows, oh, they know a little bit about this practice. So if you know something about that practice or you know somebody within the practice because of your networking, then I would include that in your cover letter. Start looking now. Don't wait till after the first of the year. It's critical that you start looking now because your timeline, is not an hourglass, folks. It's a stopwatch. And again, the best jobs are going to be the first ones to go. That being said, if you start looking now, we've got to have a solid search strategy. We're going to talk about that. So, where do you begin? You got 900 positions to look at. Where do you begin? You got online job boards, networking, recruiter boards. You want to cast as wide of a net as you can, whatever area that you're looking in. And when we start talking to candidates, we talk about, really what are you looking for? Go ahead, next slide. Personally, professionally, geographically, and financially. Those 4 areas are key to your job search and how you prioritize them. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Missy's got a poll for you.
We're just going to give you,
Have you started your, go ahead, Missy.
no, we're just going to give you guys a few seconds to go ahead and answer the question. I see great responses. Got about 5 seconds left. Okay. So it looks like most on this call have started.
Do we see the do we see the results by chance, Missy? What's the
Share
results?
results. I'm sharing right now.
Nice. Okay.
Cool.
58% started, 23% no. But
Yep. And
but I
some
will after the
meetings
webinar.
after this
All
webinar. I
right.
love that. Awesome. Thank
That's
you.
fantastic. Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
So we get asked this all the time in working with recruiters. So, is it a myth or a fact? Working with a recruiter means my total compensation package will be reduced by the amount of the recruiter's fee. And that is a myth. So if you're working with a recruiter, recruiters, whether they're contingency, retained, fixed fees, whatever their compensation, how they're compensated, number one is they're paid by the hiring entity, not by the candidate, the person looking for a position. And if a recruiter ever asks you to send them money, then I would be very apprehensive about working with that recruiter. But those fees have been pre-negotiated. It's typically on the physician side, with the clients that we work with, it's all fixed fees. They built it into their budget. It has nothing to do with total compensation. So it's a myth. How do recruiters work? A good recruiter will offer a third-party, non-biased opinion on your search. They're going to help you navigate. Look at it as a career coach throughout your entire work career. You go out and hire when you have a legal issue, you hire an attorney. When you have a tax or accounting issue, you hire a CPA. When you need advice on business solutions, you hire a business advisor. But one area that people neglect to think about is a career counselor and a career advisor. And a good recruiter is going to be your partner from day one. And they're going to give you sound advice that will help you navigate your entire process. We'll be that conduit and guiding. Now, things to talk about and consider when you're looking at your job search: geography, compensation, practice setting, work-life balance, culture. Those are four key things that you need to kind of prioritize. What's the most important? Is it geography, compensation, practice setting, culture? Next poll. Which of the following is your number one priority in those four areas? Work-life balance, geography, practice setting, compensation. This will be fun to look at for everybody's response.
And it's okay if it's different than other
And it's
people.
okay to say compensation. We talk to many candidates and they say the first thing they say is, how much does it pay? And quite frankly, I think it's funny because it's comical in some fellowship programs. It's a competition. Who gets the best job? Who gets the best pay? Who gets the best location? What's the best job? I get it.
And this would have looked different even five, definitely 10 years ago, right, Rich? The responses here. So I'm going to
Oh
end the
yeah, for sure. Yeah, we didn't even have work-life balance on it then.
call.
Work-life balance. Yeah, so
Yeah.
so only 11% said compensation. So work-life balance is the most important. And we're seeing that in the marketplace. We're seeing that across the board. Here's the challenge. We have such a shortage of pathologists that when you get plugged into these work environments, the volumes are so high. And so it's hard to create that work-life balance. So, the groups that are successfully hiring are over hiring to help offset that work-life balance.
So
Go
the
ahead.
coaching we give to clients on the other end is look at what people care about now who are graduating and adjust accordingly because they're on the short end. They got a
And
lot of
overhire.
not
Yeah,
enough.
if they can afford to overhire, meaning if they've ran the practice at four pathologists or four FTE pathologists for, a workload of X number of surgicals, they may, if they hire a fifth one to do the same volume that fourth, then they're creating a better work-life balance for the younger pathologists coming into the practice. So,
Just a heads up, we got 5 minutes, so we're gonna
yep.
roll.
And so we're going to ace your interviews. So, how do we ace your interviews? Let's go into it. First interaction. That's when the interview starts. Now, remember from the very first conversation to the very last conversation, throughout the entire process, whether you're at dinner, whether you're in the car doing a community tour, your interaction is critical and you're always interviewing. They're always going to be judging you throughout that entire process. I've got some horror story, folks, that I could share. I don't have enough time, but I've got some hilarious stories of things that have happened when the guard is down, thinking that, oh, the interview's over for the day. I'm going to go to dinner, have a couple cocktails. Wrong answer. You're still interviewing.
Or the person at the desk who schedules the interviews, they matter.
They matter. Yes, exactly. So prioritize your top three, I'd say even five jobs. Think about your strategy. Schedule and so when you if you're going to interview at three, four, five positions, your strategy needs to be that your first prioritize them as the job I really want, the second job, the third job, the fourth job, and maybe the fifth job. And interview in the reverse chronological order. So the job that you least likely think you want should be your warm-up interview because your first interview that you're going to go on is your warm-up interview. So don't go on that interview that is your top choice first until you've warmed up and you're prepared. You haven't probably, other than residency and fellowship, you haven't probably ever really interviewed for this big job, your first job as a pathologist into the private sector. So remember, you need a warm-up interview or two. First interview, warm-up interview, fire on all cylinders, be ready for the questions. Practice, drill, rehearse. Dress to impress. Think conservative. Make eye contact. I can't tell you how critical that is for pathologists. Make eye contact. Strong handshake. Those are the things that happen. Same thing with the in-person. Virtual, eye contact. Very important. Your aim is to make great connections, and your goal, the virtual interview, is to get it to the next step. Remember, it's better to get the offer and not want the job than to want the job and not get the offer. Keep that always in mind. How do you stand out during the interview? Ask questions about each person. Do some research on the people that's interviewing you. Know a little bit about them. Look at their CVs. See if there's a common thread between the two of you. Know about the practice. Do your research on the practice. Understand the demographics of the practice and make that interview count. Expect to be tested. And what that is, either a dual-headed scope or in some cases they'll give you slides to review and you're going to have to write down your answers or put your answers in.
Now on
Typical
this
interview
one, Mitch,
questions.
yeah, this will be included in the slides. So we're going to say this again at the end. If you want a copy of these slides, you can just in the chat a message to just us, give us your email address, and we will send the slides to you. So that way we don't have to go through all of these, but it will include all the typical interview questions.
Yeah. Tell me about yourself. What's your best or worst experience in training? Tell me about your most difficult case. How did you handle it? What attracts you to us to our setting? Those are all things. Remember not to talk about religion, politics. Picture yourself in their job. And what I mean by that is, when they ask you what your career goal is, to say, well, I'd love to be able to take over the practice someday. We've had people say that. Attend the actual interview alone. Don't take your spouse or significant other on the actual interview. We've had people do that. Now, when you're going on your on-site visit, your spouse, significant other should, if there is one in your life, then they should be doing conducting the community tour and looking at the things that are really going to be about the community. Remember, dinner's part of the interview. Can you go back to that last slide? Um, if you want the job, tell them that you want the job. Ask for the job. Be on time. Remember personal hygiene, cut, shaved, etc. What are your financial expectations? So we get asked this question a lot when somebody says, Missy, tell me how much, how much do you want to make? Tell me about your financial expectations. This is a double-edged sword. If you give them a figure or a range, you could really hang yourself here because if it's far above the range that they're looking at, then interview's over in their mind. However, if it's below the range that they're looking at, guess what? You're going to get somewhere in between. So don't give them a figure. Just say, if somebody says to you, what are your financial expectations? Ask them, how are other individuals at my level being compensated? And all that I ask is that you give, me, if you were to make me an offer, that you would make it fair and equitable to what others in the practice started out at.
Now, Rich, it is 12:31.
Okay, we're almost done.
Okay, cool.
All right. Give them a time frame before the offer. In other words, set up those expectations and stick to it. So know if you interview first and you have 5 interviews lined up and that first interview is your top choice and you've interviewed on that job first, which I don't recommend, again, that's your warm-up interview, then your timeline is going to be way out there and it may not meet those expectations of the people that are hiring because remember they're interviewing other people too. You're not going to be the only show in most cases interviewing for that job. Go ahead, Missy. Successfully navigate your offers. I'm going to give you some basic tips. Remember when you're negotiating, you're still interviewing. So how you handle those negotiations can be potential deal killers. If you're stuck on a certain aspect or are difficult to negotiate with, then that's a sign to the practice that you may be difficult for individual to work with, and they may walk away. Know your walkaway position. Number 2, consider the offer carefully. Is it missing anything? Counter with request. One counter. It's not a smorgasbord where you keep going back for more and more and more. Go back once, have it done, have it reviewed. Go ahead, Missy. Have it reviewed by an attorney that specializes in physician employment contract law. And if this is not the right practice for you, turn it down. It's okay to say no and say it earlier. Have it reviewed. Now, if you're going to have it reviewed and you have a family member that's an attorney, we don't recommend that because it can create friction within the relationship if it's a family member or friend. We highly recommend that you use a physician employment contract law attorney, Liz Sullivan, at McDonald Hopkins. They're the best in the business when it comes to physician employment contract for pathology. They know pathology, they do lab medicine. Here's some of the employer red flags that you need to think about. One is turnover, political issues, inconsistency. Is it a family-run business? Financial stability, non-compete, lawsuits. These are all, things that you should be looking at in your offer. If you want a copy of this presentation, just let Missy know.
Just put it in
DM
the
her
chat
in the
in a message.
chat and feel free to reach out. Go ahead, next slide. Sante Consulting, we have a number of positions. We work nationally. We are the leading provider of job search expertise for pathology and lab medicine in the United States. We have a number of positions available. If you're looking, these are just a sampling of some of the jobs that we have. If you're looking for an academic, hospital-based, commercial setting, let us know because we can help.